How's it going, everyone? It's Augie from Western Top 1000. Today is October 27th, 2020, and in this video, we're going to mainly focus on the snowstorm that's expected to occur in the Northeast going into Thursday and Friday of this week. So right now, we're taking a look at the GFS model as of Thursday, 2020, October 29th, and you see that we have a decently potent extra tropical cyclone, a decently potent trough that's moving through the southeast, and this is pretty much a combination of hurricane or tropical storm Zeta now, which is that's expected to make landfall along the Gulf Coast and also and it's also merged with this extra tropical low that was bringing a pretty hefty snowfall throughout New Mexico and Oklahoma and near the Kansas area, where we saw almost up to a foot in the higher elevations of New Mexico. And these are pretty much the two systems merged together as it's expected to occur as Zeta continues to move to the northeast. And then alongside that, this trough will move along with the dip in the jet stream towards the east, and eventually they will merge together to create a little bit of an even stronger storm, even when Zeta is weakening. So this is as of Thursday, October 29th, and you see that it's a 986 millibar storm, and while Zeta has weakened, it hasn't weakened as much as it would if it were over land. And the reason why the millibar pressure didn't drop since it made landfall is because there's a lot of instability there's a lot of cold air behind this storm, and that's creating a lot of instability. And what that means is that there's a lot of unstable air. There's a large contrast between cold air and very warm air that's circulating around Zeta, or what's left of Zeta, and pretty much the cold air is trying to filter into that warm air, and it's creating very windy conditions, and it's forcing a lot of convection to occur, especially on the eastern side, which is common for extratropical cyclones, and that's where they get most of their energy. But this, as of Thursday, you see that there's a lot of rain extending pretty much all throughout just north of the Tennessee and Arkansas border. We're seeing a lot of rain just south of the Ohio River Valley, so watch out if you're in Kentucky, southern Missouri, and even extending as far west as Oklahoma and Kansas and Arkansas. Definitely watch out for rain, and in the southeast as well, because as Zeta moves over land, where you're going to experience quite a decent amount of rain from this, as 2 to 4 inches are expected. So if your nearby river or creek is near or their banks or near breaching their banks, it's definitely something to watch out. And then moving to Thursday, it continues to move to the northeast, slightly weakening to 993 millibars, but it's still a decently sized storm. And on the southern side of it, you're going to experience a lot of wind from this storm, so watch out along the southeast, because just because it made landfall does not mean you won't experience impacts from what's left of Zeta, especially since it's merging with an extratropical cyclone, it's merging with a very cold Arctic trough with a lot of cold air behind it. And when that happens, it usually brings a lot of bad weather and very windy conditions to an area. So watch out for that, as it's typically common for that to happen in the month of October, where we see a lot of dips, Arctic troughs move towards the southeast and then merge with tropical entities around the southeast, which create a pretty potent storm. And so definitely be prepared for that if you're along the southeast of stronger winds. And then it moves to 994, and you might be wondering at this point, well, where's the snow? We didn't see snow this entire time we were looking at the forecast. It's gonna eventually come, because there's this big ridge that's currently just to the north and west of this storm, and as that ridge continues to move more easterly, we're gonna begin to see more of a northerly wind component with this ridge, and that northerly wind will bring all that cold air that's pretty much centered in Canada down towards the U.S. to the point, and it'll be just enough to where we're expected to see snow in portions of the interior Northeast. So this is as of Thursday, and then we move on to Friday, very early Friday, and then you begin to see some of the shades of blue, which represent snow in the higher elevations, like the Catskills. The Green Mountain Range is beginning to experience some snow, as the snow will happen in the higher elevations first, which is expected, since in the higher elevations, obviously the air molecules are more spread out. There's less energy, and as a result, there's less of a temperature rise to account for the lack of energy. So yeah, we're beginning to see some snow in the higher elevations of this storm early Friday, and then moving on to later during Friday morning, you see that snow swath extends far, is a lot more larger. You see that it extends almost to the coast of New England, all the way to Lake Erie, Pennsylvania, as we're seeing a large swath of snow not only impacting the higher elevations, but a good portion of upstate New York and the northern portion of Pennsylvania as well. As so you could definitely experience a decent amount of snow from this, and you definitely need to watch out. You might have some Halloween plans for this year. You definitely need to watch out if you're going out, because there's definitely that possibility of a pretty hefty snowstorm, especially in the higher elevations. I wouldn't say there's going to be anything major as of right now, because there's it could be if there's enough energy with this, and if there's just enough cold air to make the duration of the snowfall higher. But as of right now, I wouldn't say it's major, but definitely watch out, because slick snow conditions could definitely be an issue going into Friday morning and the afternoon, especially as it begins to accumulate on the roads. And it's going to take a while for this snow to accumulate, because obviously we're not even in November yet. The ground is still very warm for like snow. So it's going to take a while for that snow to accumulate on the ground, but it will eventually accumulate at especially in the higher elevations where it's cooler. So definitely watch out for that. And then moving on to Friday afternoon to Friday evening, you begin to see that snow move a little bit eastward. It moves out of Erie, Pennsylvania, and we begin to see also that snow swath move a little south, because since this low pressure is moving a little bit further and further to the west, and usually around the low pressure center, there's a lot of warm air circulating around it, which prevents enough cold air to create conditions conducive for snowfall around the low pressure system. However, since that low pressure is moving further to the east, where there's going to be less warm air that's going to circulate around the east coast to the point, and just enough moisture to the point where you will experience a pretty big swath of snow throughout the Northeast, and it could extend as far south as New Jersey, and even the GFS model is going as far as bringing this down to Long Island, which I still have my doubts about that, because I don't know, I just feel like the ocean water temperature is going to keep Long Island from experiencing any type of snowfall. However, if this ridge moves just far south enough, and if this low pressure system or Zeta takes a further eastward and southern track, there could be that possibility you may experience snow in Long Island and even further south, maybe towards New York City, and maybe as far south as Central or South Jersey. However, I wouldn't say the most likely scenario is that this will mainly be an interior Northeast snowfall threat, where the Adirondacks, the Catskill Mountains, and a lot of upstate New York and the northern portions of Pennsylvania and the Pocono Mountains will experience snowfall, as well as the northern portions of New England. I would say maybe north of Boston will experience the majority of the snowfall for this storm. And in terms of the official snow forecast as of right now, you see that it's mainly light for the most part. For the most part in Syracuse, where the forecast is 1 to 3 inches, and then near the Scranton area as well, it's 1 to 3 inches, and then a pretty large swath of 1 to 3 inches for the most part. However, in the higher elevations, that snowfall does increase to 3 to 6 inches of snow. And again, this could change a little bit by the time we hit Friday, because it's only Tuesday at this point. We have to keep that in mind. And when we're experiencing a snowstorm in October, they tend to be very difficult to forecast because we won't really, it's really difficult to find out how like the warmer temperatures will affect how much snowfall you'll experience, because while the ground may be too warm for snowfall, there could be that off chance that this snow becomes a little bit more heavy, or it becomes a little bit colder over the next several days, which cools down the ground to a point where you might experience more snow, as there's just a bunch of different temperature factors to when predicting a snowstorm in October. Especially, it's not like the winter where it's pretty certain how cold the ground is and how much cold air there will be. But when it comes to October, it's a little bit more difficult to forecast. However, this is a current forecast. It could change. However, I will say the most likely scenario is that this will mainly be an interior northeast threat. So Albany, Syracuse, Scranton, and Concord will be probably the main places that will experience accumulating snowfall. And around New Jersey and maybe New York City, you might experience some snowfall, or at least a wintry mix. However, in terms of accumulating snowfall, I would say it's for the most part very unlikely, because low pressure, as the GFS model states, is going to be a little bit too close to New York City and New Jersey. That's gonna keep the warm air around that area for a decent amount of time for enough cold air to filter in this region and bring accumulating snowfall. So maybe a dusting at best in New Jersey, New York City, and Boston. However, there's a chance that you won't see any type of snowfall at all in those places. So for the most part, this should be mainly interior northeast threat when it comes to snowfall. However, there's another big threat that definitely you guys need to be watching, especially if you're on the coast, and that's coastal flooding and the wind threat, because that could definitely be an issue if you're along the coast, because it's still going to be a pretty potent storm coming off the east coast, to a point where you might call it a nor'easter, because going into Friday, around early Friday, you see that wait, let me take this off. You see that by early Friday that the low pressure is at 996 millibars, and that's equivalent to a tropical storm. It's not the most strongest storm in the world. However, it's strong enough to bring gusty wind conditions along the coast. And since this will have a relatively large circulation, since we're going to see a lot of cold air filter in from the backside, this will have a large fetch of water to where it could bring a lot of water along the coast, so maybe some minor coastal flooding along the New England coast. If we take a look at the wind forecast that the GFS is expecting for this winter storm that's expected to come, so if we move forward to around Friday, I would say Friday, early Friday, you see the darker reds. This represents 40 knot winds, which is equivalent to around 50 50 mile per hour winds just off the coast. And you see that there's this large swath of wind that's going straight over the Atlantic, and the water really has nowhere to go but turn around and then point towards New England. So that could bring maybe some minor coastal flooding along the coast, and definitely rough surf. You don't want to be out in the sea on Friday, because it's going to be very windy and just an ugly day overall, and a lot of rain is expected as well, just the south side of the snow. So definitely keep that in mind as well. And gusty winds should continue even going inland for Zeta, where we see those wind gusts potentially over 60 miles per hour in that area, and then that wind extends all the way going into the mid-Atlantic, where you could experience 40 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts along the coast, and then just around and in the inland areas, I wouldn't say this will be a major wind threat at all, much of a wind threat at all, but you still could experience 20 to 30 mile per hour wind gusts if you're more inland during the coast. And then you could see that as it moves even further off the coast, you see that the fetch of wind increases even more as it's over the large swath of the Atlantic, and that allows the wind to pile up a lot of water onto the coast. So watch out for that if you're along the coast. And then in terms of rainfall, because that'll definitely be another issue with the storm. So you could experience up to 4 to 6 inches from Zeta, just north of New Orleans and just north of Gulfport, Mississippi. And then for a large swath of the U.S., pretty much throughout the Ohio River Valley, Oklahoma, and Kansas, and even extending to the mid-Atlantic like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, and Massachusetts, it's likely you guys will experience around 2 to 4 inches of rain throughout during this storm. So watch out if the rivers around your area are pretty high, because this rainfall could elevate those rivers to a point where it could flood your area. So to conclude, I would say the most likely scenario where you will experience snow in the Northeast will be the interior sections of the Northeast, the Catskills, where they could experience up to 6 inches of snow. But also the other areas such as Syracuse and Scranton, you could experience as 1 to 3 inches of snow as well. And definitely keep in touch with your forecast, because it could change, especially with October snowstorms. They change drastically the forecast. So keep in mind of forecast changes over the next several days. And then the rainfall throughout the Ohio River Valley will be pretty hefty, not the most heaviest rainfall in the world, but 2 to 4 inches of rain is definitely not something you want to underestimate, because if your river is pretty high, it could flood your area. And flash flooding might be also a possibility, especially with a hurricane coming through the southeast. So watch out for that along the southeast, and also watch out for the wind and coastal flooding situation along the coast, because that could occur as the storm moves off the coast of the mid-Atlantic. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to stay safe. Make sure to subscribe if you like this content, and make sure to share with friends and family. And I hope you guys all have a good day.